pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next would be attendance appointment of alternates, but our alternates are not here, so and Cindy is on her way. So Cindy will be here. Bill will not be here tonight. He got
18th, 2018.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion passes. Public participation.
Dad, you gonna speak? Can you hear me?
Just glad everybody stood for the pledge instead of kneeling.
All
I
right,
had to get that one.
there you go. All right, on to communications. I don't have any. Do you have any?
I do not.
All right, see, we're just cranking right along. Monthly reports. We got our cash collection summary, which was awesome. Anybody have any questions, any
That was
comments,
the second
concerns?
separate handout, yeah.
Yeah,
That was
right
not
here.
in our package.
All by
Don't worry
itself.
about it. I'll sneak Sarah. She knows me.
All right, so we're good with that? Everybody is good? All right, on to the financials.
All right, so the first thing, I did put the same letter I sent to all you guys explaining what happened with that change relating to the grand list. And
Yep.
it's an air pollution control equipment, and it always has been exempted for the last, since it was put in, I think 10 years ago. It's been, so it's never been counted, so it's really not a change. It's just that somebody missed the exemption when they were doing the grand list. So we've never collected taxes on it, so we're not missing anything.
Right. All right.
So revenue, we're pretty much set for the year. You'll see all the reports are just June 30.
Yep.
I just got tax collector today, so they're not all in the financials yet. But, so the things I want to talk about, transfer in is sewer assessment. Newberry benefit assessments come into the sewer assessment fund, but then get transferred to the general fund, and that's $29,977.91 for the year. So that's a new line item that you wouldn't have seen in the financials prior to this month. It's a year-end item, and that's on 8A2, very top line. State elderly tax, we're not getting that elderly tax relief of 70 grand. That was one of the things eliminated. The surplus is 1.4 million. 1.2 of it is ECS. Other two items that are in there that we are going to be one-time items is both the municipal stabilization for 90,000 and the school construction. That's principal and interest from a debt payment from 20 years ago. It was the last payment, should have been made in 14-15, and we never got it. The state held back, but they finally released it. So that 139,172.48 will not be coming again. So those are both one-time items that are in this year's revenue that will not be in the future. Treasurer section, 121,000 extra in interest, and that's just because interest rates are finally starting to creep up. There's no pilot in there yet, but there will be. That's from the Housing Authority, and we haven't gotten that one yet. And the miscellaneous revenue that's in there for 53 is prior year items. In this case, it happens to be the mirror closeout for the Hartford landfill and a Cox payment for $8,000. And they related to prior fiscal years. Town clerk conveyance is $53,000 over budget. Tax is $100,000 overall over. Building is $200,000 over, and that is, the majority is Calamar. Planning and zoning, $20,000 is MMCT application and state fees for a special use permit. Inlands and wetlands, as $9,000 from MMCT and 7,500 from the International Brethren of Electric Workers. I'm not sure what they're doing, but that was a inland wetlands permit. And that's it for revenue, unless anybody has any specific questions.
Amy,
Yes.
the International Electrical Brotherhood,
Yep.
that is, we have two proposed structures going up on a parcel they have purchased down in the industrial park. And one of the structures will be for offices for the International Electrical Brotherhood Union.
Yeah.
The other structure will be a structure for training of the apprentices
Oh,
for the union. So
so that's what the permit's for.
I do remember that from a prior meeting, some maybe Brandon, I don't know. But
Somebody
I
else
remember
must
that.
explain it, because I had no idea.
Yep.
I had to go look up what it meant.
Hello.
Okay. So overall.
Do you want to show that in here?
She-
Yeah,
She's got you.
Okay, and so total revenue is $366,000 over budget, but that already takes out the $1.6 million of appropriations from fund balance that are under the treasurer section on page 8A2. 1605 is the original budgeted of $475,000, and then the additional appropriations of $1,130,903.38. Anybody have any other revenue questions? Expenditures, I tried to do the big ones that had money left over. So the first one I started with the assessor, and that was due to a vacancy. The town planner is also due to a vacancy. The assistant planner was not there until partway through last year. Registrars, they only had one referendum. So that's why both part-time and I think it's called ballots both have extra money printing, where they pay for their ballot printing. So, because there was only one budget referendum, there was money saved in both the salary, part-time, and the printing. Human Services, it's a vacant and a position was eliminated. Police admin is due to workers' comp. The officers is due to vacancy. Dispatch is due to a vacancy. Clerical was due to a vacancy. Animal control was due to a vacancy. And overtime is over by 66, and that's because somebody has to fill the shift. So there's an offsetting. I think the officer savings was 125,000, but the overtime was over 66. Fire, we had savings in our staffing, but we used it to put more money into the pension. We offset, because they're both salary accounts, so they did an additional $19,000 contribution into the pension to help get that funded percentage going, getting in the right direction. Public Works has salary savings, they offset the overtime. Town Properties, the capital purchase was a warming rack for the senior center for their lunches when they had problems with the oven at the senior center. Building repair is heating/AC units for the new offices at the annex. They are moving Park and Rec out of the school and into the annex, which would be really nice for all the staff to be together. Electrical has a huge savings. Hydrants has a deficit, and it's an increase in the cost. It's looking like we're going to be about $360,000 for next year if we do the current monthly amount, and those are truly just Connecticut Water tells us number of feet, this is what your price is, and you just write the check. Heating oil, $30,000, which is over budget. 15 of it is just for the Public Works garage. Public Works, the Storm Emergency Fund, apparently we send our surplus from DPW, which right now is $18,000. We send it over to the Emergency Storm Fund so that we can fund overages if we have a bad winter. Senior Center, part-time, is just a staff shortage. There was position not filled. Park and Rec, staff openings in the part-time. Insurance and pension, heart and hypertension will be sent over to that fund. That fund currently has $237,000 in it, but I think the last audit said that number needed to be about $350,000. So we will send that $42,000 over to that fund. Board of Ed is down to $600,000 in the hole, but we do have entries that are supposed to make it go to zero. We have not done them yet, but I will let you know as soon as we know. And the transfer out of $21,500 was the $14,000 that went to YSB, and $7,500 went to the town planner for a grant match. So that is everything for our last year.
The only thing real quick question, Amy, was posted under the selectmen.
Yep.
There's a huge chunk left. Like,
Yeah, I think it was just over budget. I think we reduced it next year.
okay,
I think it was just too much.
okay.
I didn't give you CNR because it's the exact same as it was the month before, so it didn't seem really beneficial to give it to you again.
Don't kill more trees. Anybody have anything else? Any other questions that Amy did not cover?
I don't, I grabbed this on the
All right, so we'll move on to transfers. All right.
There are a lot,
Yeah.
but most of it's capital. The three that relate to fiscal year 17-18 are on the first sheet, 8B1.
You know what? I gotta tear this apart.
I always do too. I love those little clips. Whoop.
I gotta tear this apart.
I know you stopped.
All right, so where do we want to start? Let's see. All right, you know what, why don't we just start with the capital, and then we'll move on to the legal and that, so.
Well, that's a backwards to the agenda.
Yeah, that's true, hold on. I'm undoing Staples.
Sorry. The agenda has
Oh, there we go, never
B1
mind.
as the 17-18, and then I did 18-19 as C.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. That's fine.
So two are pretty easy. It's the same legal battle we've been having all year, that there's way more spent on legal than we budgeted. And the last one is the police emergency management stipend is over by $15.20. And because it's a salary, and it's the only salary in that account, I have to come ask for it.
Yep.
So I did just take it out of police clerical, because that's who gets the stipends.
All right, so does somebody have a motion for number 41?
I make a motion to approve transfer request number 41 for $23,000 for legal fees from health insurance to legal relations.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on to number 42.
I make a motion to approve transfer request number 42 for legal fees of $9,000 from health insurance to town council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Actually, I have a quick question. So, I guess maybe Amy, this is, yeah, it's really you. So, is there a way, as we as a board, when it comes to legal bills, I just feel it's like huge lately, and it keeps growing, that we add when we review the bills that are getting paid every month?
So you want to review what we're
Just what
paying?
they're going, like labor relations, right? And town council, was it real estate, was it taxes, was it, what was it? You know what I'm saying? Just so, because
I mean,
we
the
just
bills
keep,
have a ton of things on them.
yeah,
you know,
because we
they
just
have
keep
each
approving and saying, oh
conversation.
yeah, okay, legal, oh yeah, okay, legal. I just don't feel like sometimes we're doing our due diligence by just saying, oh, okay, legal.
I don't know as a board, but that's really
Yeah.
our stuff, but if somebody
I
wants to
know.
come in and look through them, they're more than welcome to come look through them.
So we could do it that way.
Yep.
That we could put
That's probably
somebody.
better.
Yeah, So we could put
And then
somebody,
they could go through the detail and the,
yeah,
so,
just so,
the
because
comfort
it
level.
yeah, because it just seems to be growing and growing and growing and not
It
stopping.
is very expensive.
Yeah, and it's not stopping,
Yep.
so. Okay, so anyways, that was just my question, sorry. So anything else? All right, so all those in favor? Opposed? All right, motion passes. Number 43.
Make a motion to approve transfer request number 43 in the police department for $20 from police clerical salaries to emergency management stipend.
And is there a second?
This is so stupid.
Can you do something
Is that your second?
Are you seconding that?
I'll second it. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Unfortunately, the way the charter reads, it says if it's a salary item, it has to come from another salary account, and in this account, there wasn't another salary account in this department. So I really didn't have a choice but to
No, I
come.
understand the
So-
problem, but I can remember emergency management, none of our guys got anything. So that,
All right, so
Well,
on
then
to
here's the
CIP, number 2.
Did we do this last time? All these transfers?
You did not. What you did last time was the transfer for the additional appropriations we did for June.
Right.
So they would have been fiscal 17-18 transfers. So this was done, the capital group met, but we did not do any transfers. And when I look back, they actually painfully go transfer from transfer. And I'm not quite sure why. You have a group that sets what's going to be, you already have it in the budget, and then the group sets the dollar amounts of what they're going to be. So I'm not sure that it's really necessary to bring these transfer by transfer. I can't find anything that really requires us to, but clearly past practice has been that they've been brought to you.
Right.
So these are the allocations of
So what they
CIP for
chose.
current year
Yeah.
through the budget process.
I don't remember that.
Okay, I move to approve transfer request number 2 in the amount of $88,000 from CIP to PDCNR.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I move to approve transfer request number 3 in the amount of $75,000 from CIP to PWCNR, Public Works.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Number 4? Number 4?
I move to approve transfer request number 3 in the amount of $350,000 from CIP to PWCNR.
Okay, it's number
I'm
4.
sorry,
Number
number
4.
4, apologize.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Number 5.
I move to approve transfer request number 5 in the amount of $190,000 from CIP to PWCNR.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 6.
I move to approve transfer request number 6 in the amount of $25,000 from CIP to ITCNR.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Number 7.
I move to approve transfer request number 7 in the amount of $50,000 from CIP to PWCNR.
Is there a second?
I second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 9.
No, the next one needs to be number 8, because there's
Oh,
two number
yeah,
9s.
two number 9s.
It's not a number.
Number 8.
I move to approve transfer request number 8 in the amount of $20,000 from CIP to Assessor CNR.
Second.
I second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Now number 9.
I move to approve transfer request number 9 in the amount of $25,000 from CIP to Human Services CNR.
Second.
I second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Alright, passes. And number 10.
Because no one else wants to talk.
I guess.
You're doing such a good job.
I don't like spending money.
I move to approve transfer request number 10 in the amount of $36,980 from CIP to PD CNR.
And second.
I second.
Any discussion?
We
All
buy
those in,
word chat software? I thought we had all this stuff.
It's the third of 5,
yeah,
I think.
remember? Not the whole thing, we didn't do the whole thing.
Uh,
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah,
Motion still passes. Number 11.
I'll make a motion to approve transfer request number 11 for $12,430 from CIP to, what's the,
TP LED lighting.
TP.
Oh, Town
CNR,
Properties.
Town Properties, CNR.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And number 12.
Make a motion to approve transfer request number 12 for $10,000 from CIP to Public Works, CNR.
Second?
New garage equipment.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
What is the actual equipment?
That's a new garage, something for the garage. Do you know what it is, Bob?
no.
Oh, I might have the list. Hold on. See if it tells me what it is. No, it doesn't.
Wasn't it a lift or something, wasn't it?
I kind of remember the lift.
For use in the garage.
I think it was.
Who's our second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Gee, and this sounds
All right.
really problem. Using
Oh, you're there.
Let me sign those before I go anywhere.
Thank you.
It doesn't give us any.
From now on, we're gonna get in the habit that they just come on down here.
He's usually retroactive.
What is today's date?
15.
Thank
It seems weird that we have to do that,
We always, I think we always have that, right?
because I don't think can we even, what happens if we say no?
True. Well, but isn't that always a question, right? That was the whole other question. So 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Back to my agenda. Done with transfers. On to Bob, Board of Selectmen updates and referrals.
Just not very much, but I'll pass these out. Pass them down. I think I have a lot of them. I'll also pass them all down. So I printed out a lecture. And what this is last night I went to a planning and zoning meeting, and the Warehouse Point Fire Department came in and asked to have a digital sign, replace the current sign in Warehouse Point. And up until this point, in July, the Board of Planning and Zoning passed the ordinance to allow for digital signs. So now digital signs can be installed, and this is the first one that is going to be installed in Warehouse Point. So I just thought I'd show you that. Now, probably in the next year or two, there'll be other.
So did they pass that after, because I know the Board of Ed wanted one, right? And they
Yes.
wouldn't let them have it.
It was in July that they were allowed to have it.
Okay,
They changed the regulations for the signs.
gotcha.
So maybe the town will be going for one. Rand?
Just to give you guys a little quick background on to my understanding, there was a federal court ruling on signage, and it prevented the town up until this point from adopting a regulation that excluded properties or certain properties in the community from this. And now apparently there's been another decision that's come down that allows municipalities for this type of signage, but it doesn't necessarily allow it any other place, but these signs primarily are used for municipal business, whether it's school function, town function, fire department function, anything that deals with the municipality. And I believe if you read the zoning regulation, it states that out pretty specifically at this point in time.
There are limits, and I've forgotten what they were, but there's a certain square footage that the sign can actually have. I don't know what the square footage is, but there are regulations on the size of the sign, the height of the sign.
So if a restaurant or something wanted to apply for it based on what Rand said, they wouldn't be able to?
I don't believe they'd be able to, sir, at this point in time, because the rest of the sign regulation body prohibits that flashing electronic display for businesses. Apparently, it's looked at as more of a distraction for drivers and people in parking lots and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is advertising the product as opposed to providing general information
Dates or
to the
events
public
or
about
things, okay.
municipal events and that type of thing.
Okay, and another thing I'll bring up, and Rand probably can speak to it better than I can, but Calamar is now not building. They've stopped building. And there seems to be a finance problem that they're having. So we were concerned. They gave us the money for the building permit, and they started gangbusters building and putting in footings, and there's one elevator shaft sticking up there, but there's no workers there now, and so it's not moving forward at this time. That's all I know.
There again, I spoke with their project manager this morning. He was in my office, and according to the site superintendent, there was some snafus in some of their financial documents. Apparently, they've been able to work through those, and the funding and finance should be in place by the end of the first week of September. So it appears as though, according to their project superintendent, they will get back on track by the end of the first week of September.
All right, and then the final thing that I have is just to say that we're going into negotiations, labor negotiations for dispatchers, supervisors, and clerical. So if anybody from the Board of Finance wants to join one of those negotiation teams, they're welcome to do it.
Yeah, and we do need somebody, and the unfortunate part is really the daytime with getting people there. I know Alan is helping us by doing police. I just don't know who can.
I can do it as long as I'm here.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
What time it would, like?
Well, we have to decide what time is convenient. None of these negotiations I mentioned have started. So both lawyers will see what time's available for them, and we'll fit it into what time's available for the rest of the negotiation team.
Did we get, Bob, I don't know, I could be wrong, because do I remember seeing an email though from one person saying something about September 6th worked for him, and they were going to try to get that date for all of you, see if it worked for all of you? I kind of remember seeing that email.
I would imagine it was the dispatchers, and
Okay.
I don't have a date that I'm aware of. Maybe September 6th is a start date, but I'll check it.
Okay, and Cindy, I'll check in the email. I'll forward it to you if I have it.
Yeah, well, and I could review my
Okay, cool.
emails.
All right, awesome.
That's all I have.
That's it. Okay. And you have a meeting tomorrow, right? Thursday?
We do. We have a Board of Selectmen meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, perfect. And Board of Ed updates and referrals.
None that I know of. They didn't give me anything. I thought they were gonna be here, but,
Yeah.
so the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed updates and referrals, I added these two to your agenda. So that they'll be standard on there, even if the Board of Ed doesn't come, they'll still be on there as an item. And if they
Okay.
need an additional appropriation or something or forwarding to you, that's where I would put them.
Yeah, we probably should, when the school year starts, reach out to them, because I remember when, I remember that when Christine started, she said that somebody was gonna try to get here at least every other month.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I know it's summer, and they're all kind of, so maybe as the school year starts, we should reach out to Kathy or Christine and just see if they plan on doing that.
The other thing they don't do is provide financials, which is what I'm used to getting. Part of the town financials would have Board of Ed in it in my other town, so.
To be honest with you, and that's another thing I guess we could ask them about, because I don't know that they provide that to their own board all that often. I mean, I've looked at their agendas, and I don't see that for them. I do know for a fact they don't do transfers like we do. Like, none of that is done as part of their meeting, so, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know that we would ever get that, to be honest with you. Because I don't know how often they, I mean, I suppose we could ask. I'm not, don't ever say never, I guess. No, what does that say? Never say, whatever. Yeah.
Never say, but,
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know how frequently they even get it, so we should probably ask. We can ask, for sure. Yep. And tell me a little bit about the $600,000, I guess, is my question.
They have transfers to move them to other places, so to grants, to title money. So they have, everything gets spent out of the general fund.
Yep.
And then they get allocated out to where they belong. And when we got all done originally, I think if you looked at these statements a month ago, they would have had $2 million deficit. So we did some entries. There was some miscommunication about what entries should be being done. They thought we were doing all of them. We thought we were waiting for them to tell us which ones to do, because it technically is their financials. I mean, we have a number in our budget, in our report, but it's
Yeah.
really not our number. So my staff wasn't doing anything. So they had gotten to where she was just recording AP and payroll as it came across. So it put them in the hole. It was none of the moving to the other grants. So she did the one she had. It still left them $600,000. She shot an email over to him saying, hey, I've done everything I had, this is where we are. And after a few weeks, he got back to us saying, here's some more entries. So it's things getting spent out of the general fund that really belong to other funds.
How are we doing on our end of the year? Like, you know, well, we're gonna end up talking with Mike about that, so I guess we can just talk about.
What their numbers are at the end of the year?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Okay. Okey-doke. Anything else from anybody? All right, then we're on to number 11, new business dog fund deficit fund balance.
So the page you have in here is the audit.
Yeah.
And I did through everything, tried out almost everything. But one of the things I noticed was the dog fund, which is the third column. We bring in about $8,000 from our charging everybody $10 to get their dog license, if it's neutered. I don't know what the fee is if it's not. But of that $8,000, $5,000 of it goes back to the state. So even though we record it as $8,000, it's really about $3,000. The only other thing we budget for is salaries. And we budget for that in the general fund under the police department, but it's only salaries. So we move the budget and the salary expense at the end of the year over there. But we have no way to cover the rest of the expenses, the pound maintenance, any vet bills, any other things that came out of animal control. So we leave the fund in a deficit. And if you look at the very bottom, the beginning fund balance was already $5,000 in the hole. So that means as of June of 16, they were already $5,000 in the hole. The year ending June 30 of 17 was another $4,000. So at the end of June 30 of 17, they were $9,000 in the hole. So we're not funding enough. What we did in Canton is we actually sent them money. Part of our general fund budget was a line saying animal control. And we sent money over to that fund to help cover all their costs. So we have a couple ways we can do it. Right now, the police is doing just the salary part, which doesn't make a lot of sense. They need to either do all of it or none of it. I would almost rather see them do none of it and just do it as ACO and send whatever the whole amount is over there that needs to be covered for their expenditures. I did talk to the chief and deputy chief the other day, and they said they'd like to see it kept in its own fund, but they could give me a very accurate budget of what needs to be covered. So I almost would rather see them moved into that where we have all the other organizations that we give money to, like the Historic Museum and that kind of stuff, and have just a dog or animal control line and then send over what needs to be sent over versus piecemealing where we budget, where we don't.
So I guess you're saying it didn't happen for the last 2 years, so history was what before?
I don't know.
Kinda
I'm
hard to-
kind of thinking that there might have been an allocation over there, but I can't really tell.
I don't ever remember.
The person,
I remember salary as part of the budget, but never talking about covering the pound itself.
well, the person that was there full-time, and I don't know how long ago he left, he may have made enough money to make it be in the black
Yeah.
because he worked full-time.
Mhm.
So that means he was out to calls more often. How our people did it in Canton was, if they went out to a call, the person who called got checked to make sure their dogs were licensed, along with the person who got called on. So
Yeah.
every time she went, she was collecting money from both sides of the fence for the people who were having problems.
Right.
So, and that was just the way she did it. So, you know, part of it is, if you only have part-time people, how much are they covering? And are they going to the people to get the money? Are they doing any cold calling? You know, hey, I see your dog's not registered. You know, are they showing up at people's houses? So, you know, part of it is how much effort you're putting in versus, but the state is very firm. You collect $5,000, they get 50% of it, plus they get all this other part of the fee, which is like $2,000. So we're sending, I think our check is $5,081 for this year. So right away of that 8, now I only have, I send 5 back to the state, so I have 3 to cover everything other than salary. It's never gonna happen. Nope.
Doesn't, that's why years ago when we tried to make it a shared service, it was such a good idea.
Well, we still had to fund it.
Yeah, we did, but.
We still had to fund it. It wasn't
we
shared
would've-
service in Canton, it was shared with Avon. But it still had to be funded,
Oh, yeah.
because they just,
So we'd just be more effective.
for $3,000, they can't run an animal shelter,
No.
and their costs tied to that. So right now, I'm just informing you guys. Next month, I think I will come with an additional appropriation request. I don't care, we can transfer it out somewhere else, but I want to know what the June 30 numbers are, so we can do it as a June 30. So by the audit for June 30 of 18, the number will be clean. There won't be a deficit.
Who supervises that? Like, it's all
Police.
under the police?
Yep. And if the person, we have just a part-time person now, and if she's not in, the officers have to pick up the animals.
So the chief will be providing you a budget? and
That's
you'll
what he
be able to
said,
look
so
at
for
that
next year, we will
week?
have, oh, for next year?
Yeah,
I was gonna give you actual real financials for this year,
okay.
but I asked him, he told me he could give me a budget, but I'm assuming he's thinking the next budget
Okay.
cycle.
Got it.
So we would have support for whatever that number
Okay.
needs to be. So, this was just about informing you guys.
All right, on to unfinished business, encumbrance policy. Mike? Oh, there's no chair. Usually there's
So I
always a
gave
chair.
you guys the policy that I gave you last month.
Can I
Yeah.
come up to
Yeah,
the
just
table?
grab a chair. Usually there's one there, but I guess not now.
There's too many of us on the table.
I know, right?
All right, so I did try to come a little bit prepared, because you're hitting on a topic that I consider to be a somewhat gray area in the accounting world. And I think if you talk to 10 different people, either within like a business manager or a finance director, different towns, you may get 10 different responses. And the whole issue surrounds encumbrances. And so when we talk about kind of the financial statements, we kind of highlight this a little bit when we go through the annual audit presentation, but you do have a number of different financial statements within the financial statements, and each of those are on kind of a different basis of accounting. And so what we're obviously focused on here is the budgetary basis of accounting. So I did include some items here. So it is on the modified accrual basis of accounting. So expenditures are recognized when they occur, regardless of when the cash is dispersed, except for unmatured debt, accrued interest, long-term liabilities that are not expected to be liquidated with currently available financial resources such as compensated absences, accrued vacation, those sorts of things. Those are expensed when they actually mature or when they become due. And then you also have supply inventories and prepaids, which under the accounting rules can be expensed either when they are dispersed, which is the purchase method, or when they are used, which is the consumption method. And basically the standard practice within governments is the purchase method. So if you buy a stack of paper, you expense it when you purchase the paper, although you may use the paper over a period of time, right? So you're not actually recording inventory related to your supplies. Then there's an item in here which is potentially the biggest difference between a budgetary basis of accounting and a GAAP basis, which is the accounting that's required by generally accepted accounting principles. And that is the use of encumbrance accounting. And what I did was I included a reference. I attached kind of the GFOA best practices. And the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, they provide a lot of guidance for municipalities or governments. And here this talks about the basis of accounting versus the budgetary basis. And I highlighted it, but when I printed it, it did not highlight on your copies. So I'm just going to read a couple kind of excerpts from there. It says, for example, governmental funds are required to use the modified accrual basis of accounting in GAAP financial statements, whereas the cash basis of accounting or the cash plus encumbrance basis of accounting may be used in those same funds for budgetary purposes. And then further down, it says encumbered amounts are commonly treated as expenditures under the budgetary basis of accounting, while encumbrances are never classified as an expenditure under the GAAP basis of accounting. All right. So the GFOA is not the regulatory requirements in terms of what the town needs to comply with. They're just putting out guidance. I'm just basically showing you that in practice there's a difference in the accounting on a GAAP basis and sometimes on a budgetary basis. They go on to recommend that budget documents clearly define the basis of accounting that's used for budgetary purposes. If the budgetary basis of accounting and the GAAP basis of accounting are the same, this fact should be clearly stated. If the budgetary basis of accounting and the GAAP basis of accounting are different, the major differences and similarities between the two bases of accounting should be noted. And then it's interesting that they actually say the use of technical accounting terms should be avoided whenever possible. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. In cases where the use of technical accounting terms cannot be avoided, the terms should be clearly defined and fully explained. So, in general, I've been auditing municipalities for about 18 years now. And the practice of using encumbrances on a budgetary basis are used by the majority of municipalities. So what is an encumbrance? The accounting standards actually don't define what an encumbrance is because it is not recognized as an expenditure for GAAP purposes. Right? So encumbrances are generally defined by legislation, policy, or acceptable budgetary practices, and are commonly recognized as an expenditure against a budget appropriation in the year in which the purchase order or other legally binding commitment is issued for goods or services. So this differs from an expense. So an expense, the actual good has to be received or the services have to be rendered prior to year end. So an encumbrance is really looking at the obligation for that to occur in a future period. And again, when we, from an audit perspective, when we look at encumbrances, we like to, as a test, verify that the purchase order or the contract was executed prior to your year end. And that's if you permit the use of encumbrance accounting. Okay. So what do we look for in terms of what is your budgetary policy? So one is state statute. And I think if you go through the state statutes, and I've gone through them many times, it does not talk about the use of budgetary accounting. So a lot of times people will say, well, this has been our practice. This is what we have historically done. This is what other municipalities have done. We also look at town charter, and I did include a copy, kind of an excerpt, and it's on page 4 of the charter. And this is, in my opinion, this is where the issue kind of lies in defining what an encumbrance is and whether or not an encumbrance is acceptable from a budgetary perspective. So the town charter says any portion of an annual appropriation remaining unexpended or unencumbered at the close of the fiscal year shall lapse. And then it goes into the exception with respect to long-term capital improvements. And so the issue becomes, you know, the first sentence there where it says unexpended or unencumbered. So the expended piece is easy. That's defined. We all know what an expense is. It's been incurred. The issue is what is the encumbrance piece? And so the recommendation that we had in the past was, well, you really need something to define that. There should be a policy that defines what an encumbrance is. And ultimately, my feeling was whatever the town board of finance or the board of selectmen, I'm not sure how that process works in the town, adopted, it would also be applicable to the board of education because it's really at the kind of the charter level. You're not telling them what to spend their money on, you're just clarifying what you believe your charter allows.
And we did do that, June 16th to 14th.
Correct. So in your policy, and I did provide, I think Kim Ward was the one that kind of, right. So I did provide her with some guidance. She pulled together, I think, a policy based off of some other policies that other towns have. And in there under, so on page 6, which is the policy, which I think Amy has also previously provided you, under section 5.1, which defines as encumbrances, which is anticipated expenditure in the form of a contract or other commitment that is chargeable to an appropriation and for which part of the appropriation is reserved, the appropriation remains encumbered until the payment is made or the obligation expires or cancellation occurs, at which time some or the entire encumbrance is reversed in the subsequent fiscal year. An encumbrance is not considered an expenditure or liability for GAAP reporting, but will be charged as a reduction of the available appropriation for budgetary purposes. So one of the things we do in connection with the audit is we identify what are your encumbrances, and we need to know that so that we can reverse them for GAAP reporting purposes. So there's a reconciliation in the financial statements that shows this is your expenditures on a budgetary basis, this is your expenditures on a GAAP basis. So that's town charter. Obviously, we just talked about your policy. Also, in the financial statements, one of the things I did, because again, this is a gray area, I was curious and I just kind of went and looked at a couple of other municipal financial statements that are audited by some of the other major firms that perform audits of municipalities. And so on page 5, these are the first 3 that I actually picked. So you have Windsor Locks, which is audited by Bloom Shapiro. They have a policy: encumbrances are recognized as valid and proper charge against the budget appropriation in the year in which the purchase order, contract, or other commitment is issued, and accordingly, encumbrances outstanding at year end are recorded in budgetary reports as expenditures in the current year. And it kind of has the amount of encumbrances that were outstanding. Same thing for New Canaan, which is audited by O'Connor Davies, and Greenwich, which is audited by RSM. So I just kind of wanted to kind of give you that background because at first glance I can see where, as a board, you would say the expenditure has to be incurred prior to June 30 or the money is returned to the town. So this is the kind of what I call the gray area. And so my recommendation was to adopt a policy. You could also look to request a legal opinion from a compliance perspective. with state statute. Again, I think you would have a hard time finding something that says you can or can't. I think it's more based on your own charter, your own policies. And again, you could address that potentially through charter revision or by ordinance, something along those lines. So that's kind of the background. If, from an audit perspective, from my perspective, the risks associated with permitting encumbrances is, one, it may allow for some budgetary manipulation. So in my mind, that's kind of like the double dipping. I may end up purchasing something that I budgeted, included in my budget for next year, because I had available funds left this year. So now I've kind of freed up those funds next year to spend it on something else. It does allow for waste, which I consider kind of low priority spending. You get to the end of the year and you say, geez, we have this money left over, and you may purchase stuff that, you could use that money better elsewhere. But it can also allow for, advancements, improvements to further your mission. So I've had boards of education that said, we really want to increase the computer ratio for our students. They have money left over in their budget. As part of their process, their year-end closing process, they approve the purchase of those. And those are ultimately kind of set up as an encumbrance. But those are some of the types of things. So I understand the concerns. We do look at it, we do want to make sure that, again, there's not abuse, that you don't have a classroom full of paper because you had, money left over and you just stock up on 8 years worth of paper. So it does have to go through the approval process, in terms of the superintendent and their purchases, but it is obviously an area of concern and a little bit of a gray area of accounting. So thoughts, questions?
I think my concern is just that each year it seems to be like we think we have the handle and then it gets changed and there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Consistency. Yeah. It seems like we thought we had it and we were all good, but then now it sounds like last year we just encumbered one large number not accompanied by any, oh, well, this is what I got left over, I'm going to cover this amount. That's not what it was. It's supposed to be, like you said, whether it's paper or whatever, I'm buying 50 computers, I'm going to encumber this money, put the order in June 30th, and that's perfectly fine.
Right.
Just a encumbrance of a number and being done, it just doesn't seem to be consistent. We seem to be like, when we think we have it done and fixed, or everybody understands it,
Something comes up.
Yeah, it's not. It's different, and yeah, so that's my concern.
I guess I didn't realize that it was just a number. I assumed that they had backup for all the purchase orders.
So when did you think
Well,
it
I
was
think
just
what
a
was,
number?
well, no, we were concerned this time, we were talking about, that's why
Well,
we
they
had
didn't
Mike
think they
come.
had to do them by June 30,
Right,
Okay.
when we met.
Which I think may have been a misunderstanding because
They thought they could get them when they felt like it.
yeah,
Yeah.
because because that
that's
was
a
an issue that
misunderstanding.
we've raised in the past, and that was an issue that that part of the whole policy was to ensure that that wasn't happening. So
Right.
I think that was somewhat of a kind of a miscommunication. Maybe they didn't understand, but
well, and that's, you know what I'm saying, and by this time,
yeah,
we should all understand it, we've done it way too many times.
right.
And, and actually, and they tried to tell him, oh, we've done it this way for years, and
Yeah.
it's like, So she called me, she said, really, have they done it this? I'm like, no, this is like one of those gray areas
Right.
that we seem to go over every single year. So that's why I think we just need to be, the gray area has to be just a little less gray, maybe?
Right.
Or some sort, it's just,
But we have the policy, so what's gray about it?
we just told you all the gray.
But it's in, the policy makes it not gray, right?
Well, it
What am I
still
misunderstanding?
talks about, a contractual obligation, but it doesn't say it has to be signed in ink and that the purchase order has to be created before June 30. So unfortunately, those are one of those things that,
So in our testing, and they know this, that if they do not have that, then we would propose that that gets reversed and recorded as an expenditure of the subsequent year.
Right.
So I am comfortable that they have that understanding. I know, Amy, I was at that meeting, so they may have just some,
Well, I mean, our
miscommunication.
policy reads, encumbrances are required to be set up when the town has commitments related to unperformed contracts for goods or services. So that doesn't say that they have got to have their stuff ordered by June 30. So they could say, oh, I got a commitment, I told the guy I was buying $50,000 worth of stuff. So unfortunately, our policy is almost as vague as all the rest of the regulations tied to it.
Agonizing hours and hours and hours going over purchase orders and dates. And like, I can't believe that that's great. I mean, because we made them have purchase orders.
Yeah,
Well, but Andy said that he didn't remember having that they've been allowed to buy next year's stuff
So that's a-
by
It's in the
encumbering
minutes.
stuff.
So that's a different kind of topic, right? So,
That was the other gray one, right?
We're-
Where you
we're-
said they
we're
could
encumbered-
stockpile.
right, so we're encumbering things, and that's where the potential for what you could consider budget manipulation and those sorts of things. And that's why, in my mind, you always want to have transparency through that process. So if we are going to encumber funds, what are we encumbering them for, and what is the benefit to the district to do that? And that should be really more, I think, at the Board of Education level, and that's where that transparency should be. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I wouldn't necessarily support that you buy supplies for next year with the previous year's budget. The purchase cycle is not necessarily, it happens throughout the year. A lot of times with boards of education, they'll hold off purchasing certain supplies that they budgeted for, just because
Right, in case something
comes
happens.
up, they want to have some budget money available, and then they get towards the end of the year and they say, okay, geez, well, we kind of held off doing this, so let's kind of, purchase that.
Some of that is when the money comes in, the grants that come in so late in the year, they don't know what they are. So they kind of
I mean,
hold off and they wait and see.
Yeah,
I don't
they
remember
draw
what
down the
grants-
money
yeah.
on the grants based on their expected, expenditures. So they should be kind of factoring that in from a cash flow perspective. But anyways, I am comfortable as your auditor that at least for last year with the policy that we looked at and we tested, that they did have all those purchase orders and commitments in as of year end for the items that were tested. I did have discussions with Andy subsequent to when you had your discussions with him. He said he's fully understands that process, and so I don't expect to have any issues. But again, this continues to be a gray area.
Well, I think too, with, I don't know, with you being new and with them too, maybe one of the biggest things is, and I think during one of the, not this last audit, but the audit before, I felt like it was a he said, she said. Every time it seemed I'd talk to Kim and you were here, and she'd be like, okay, we have everything under control, he's going to go to the Board of Ed, and then you'd come back from the Board of Ed, and that changed, and it was like back and forth of he. So I think the biggest thing is that it's always the three of you, like, it's always Board of Ed, town treasurer, you, like working hand in hand, and I guess us too, but we're not like
So my
on
hope
the daily.
is with Amy on board, and it may take her some time, that there'll be a process that's going to be in place to make sure that, that's not an issue.
Okay.
So, and I think with your background and experience, you'll be able to make that happen, so, but,
I kind of told them they had to.
yeah.
Okay, good. All right. All right. Just making sure, because I do want to alleviate that, the whole.
And I do make sure
back
if
and
I'm
forth and-
asking a Board of Ed question, when I send it to Mike, I send it to both Christine and Andy at the same time. So everybody knows that I'm asking a question. And then when Mike replies, then everybody sees what the answer is. So it's not them going back after the fact, looking for a different answer.
No more
So,
tennis.
yes.
So I'm clear, the thing is that they're saying it might not have to be a purchase order, it could just be a commitment, is that the gray?
Well, they were saying that they didn't realize POs had to be in by June 30. is what they were saying.
Oh, the POs had to be in by, they just, because it does say purchases or contracts that have an order date prior to July 1, the shipping date or services rendered after June 30th. So it tells you what, it tells you what. It doesn't tell you when you have to have them turned in by. I mean, you're not gonna have them turned in by June 30th because you're still doing the account, you know.
Well, that's the problem. If they're
Right.
ordering something and it's gonna be encumbered, it really needs to be ordered by June 30th.
Right.
Because that's when you're making that commitment.
Right, that's what this
So,
says.
them finding out that they got extra money in July or August after they've paid all their bills
No.
is not a time for them to be encumbering things.
No.
Right.
So from
There has to be a
an
time frame.
audit perspective, a risk that we typically look at is, okay, just because you have a purchase order that's dated prior to June 30 doesn't mean you actually submitted the purchase. So, you know, with the accounting systems, you have the ability to backdate purchase orders. It's something you can do within the system. So when we do our testing, we also look at the invoices to look at, a lot of time the invoices will have order date or something along those
Right.
lines. So it's an understandable, it's a risk, it's an issue. I've had some towns create an ordinance that has basically said we're modified accrual basis of accounting, and there's no encumbrances. The challenge there is, you know, when you look at it from a Board of Education perspective, they'll just probably accelerate that purchase so that everything's actually received or provided prior to June 5th. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily change what you're trying to address.
No, you're trying to address ending your year and ending,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
it's, you know, year end is year end, so. All right. Well, I guess we go from here and wait and see. Northing home.
From a board perspective, you don't want to see a significant percentage of their budget being encumbered,
Right.
right?
And it wasn't a lot. I think they were down to $80,000 or something.
they
They
had
didn't
gotten
have a
it
lot
down.
of money.
Yep.
And
No,
they said
got
it was
down.
actually less than they had thought they were gonna have when they prepared next year's budget. They were assuming they were gonna be able to pre-buy some dollar amount of stuff. And they were not, because they had a special ed student come in late in the year, which was
Right.
not budgeted for. So they ended up using the money for that, so they didn't have as much. So that's another thing. I mean, if we don't encourage it to use it in next year's budget, then they don't have to be so worried about getting it spent, because now, next year's budget is technically short already.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they counted
And
on a
that's,
bigger
and you can
number.
understand, that's part of their fear and their worry is the unknown. You know, what's gonna happen the second week of June.
That's why they
something-
keep talking about that 1%.
Right. Yeah, they want that fund of 1%. I mean, my feeling is, we have a healthy enough fund balance that if they really need something, they should be able to come back here and ask.
The problem with that 1%
Versus a
is
fund that
nobody
they
agrees
spend it
on
however
what
they
it's
want.
supposed to be for.
So the 1% just gives Board of Finances the ability to establish a reserve fund for the benefit of the Board of Education and allow you to transfer up to 1% of their budget into that fund.
Right.
It does not stipulate how that fund is managed. It does not stipulate how what that fund needs to be used for. So towns that have allowed or permitted it, have wanted kind of have some budgetary control over it, will put in kind of procedures that, they have to make a request for the board of the Board of Finance. They can only use it for capital purposes or for special education, to cover certain costs.
Are they funding it out of their leftover
Out of their
in their surplus?
Yeah, if they
Okay.
have the leftover, it can go into the 1%. And we were really close to doing it, but then, like just what Mike said, we were doing it, you can have it for capital and special ed, and they just wanted a no rules 1%. And that's where everybody, that's where the brakes all kind of went,
Yeah, it's a negotiation process. I mean,
Yep.
again, you don't have to do it at all, so.
Yeah.
And then they asked my opinion, and I said, don't like it at all.
Yeah.
And so
If they
what
want more
what's their
money,
opinion?
they
What
have
that-
an avenue to come forward for
Yeah.
more money.
What that does, though, is the avenue that they have to come through now typically has to go through town meeting,
Yeah.
right? So this would remove that requirement and
Right.
really put it at the Board of Finance or however you stipulate. You could stipulate it at the Board of Ed. It's a non-lapsing fund for the Board of Education. And they can just use it at their discretion. But again, the statute doesn't stipulate how you are to manage, those funds. So.
It's another case where someone was asking for something, almost had it and gave it up because of a little thing. That's happened to a couple of big things. Like,
That was the condo people when we gave them fire hydrants, but they wanted fire hydrants and lights and wouldn't take just the fire hydrants.
Are you kidding?
Yep. Yep. They told us that wasn't enough and take it. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
There was a couple things
Yep.
like that.
It was during budget, like 2-3 years ago. So yeah, all right, cool.
I know you talked about the dog fund.
Yeah.
Just kind of my thoughts on that. Typically, you have a dog fund because the monies that you collect are restricted for that purpose. So to the extent your expenditures are always going to be in excess of your operations, you could just absorb that into the general fund. So you can budget revenues and.
Yeah, the chief didn't really want to do that, but,
Yeah.
and I will tell you, for the dog report,
Yeah.
it's way easier
Way
being in
easier
its own
broken
fund.
out, yeah, that's true.
We don't have to pick through the general fund to figure out where
To
those
figure out
expenses
where
went. So I kind of like the idea of, but I just can't imagine how it's ever going to self-support.
Yeah.
And $3,000 is not enough to cover, I mean, we're already budgeting the salary, but $3,000 just isn't going to cover everything else.
No.
So we don't make a lot of money on the dog fund. We make $8,000, and we give 5 of it to the state.
Right.
Nice. Seems like what everybody does, give more than what you got. All right. Okay, cool. Any other questions of Mike when he's here?
Well, don't run away though, because the next thing we're going to talk about is software.
Software, okay.
And my favorite program.
Okay, so let's not, don't run away, Mike. We're talking about software. Software that Amy hates.
Every time I have to run something.
All right, so let's go on to software.
So I actually gave you guys a sample. I ran
Yes, I
this
see.
report. You cannot tell what account it's for. You can't tell what period of time it's for. And this is a regular general ledger report run off my general ledger system. It is very difficult to use. And the report, a lot of it we have to report right. So some of it is me learning how to write reports, but I should be able to run a GL detail and it should tell me what account I'm running and the period of time it's covering. I should not have a report that says account detail and a whole list of stuff that happened. I don't know how we got sold that this was a great thing. I do realize that Phoenix was here before that and it wasn't.
Wasn't it recommended by the state or something like that?
So here's my understanding of it, because we were not involved in that process at all. I think actually one year I came in and you had to switch systems. And so we really had no idea. But AccuFund was, I think they were working with Bloom, or they
partnered with Bloom. Because when I call them, they'll tell me that they can't help me, I need to call my partner.
Yeah.
And then I have to pay Bloom to help me
Okay.
to get some of the stuff done.
Right.
So AccuFund will help answer questions, and for that we pay some amount of money.
Yeah.
But anytime I have to go to Bloom, we have to pay by the hour.
Right. Wow. Okay.
So-
See, I didn't even know that. The system itself, I think, was initially established for nonprofits. So I actually see when you run some reports, some of the default language in there is nonprofit language. It's not governmental language. So I don't know if it was just kind of adapted for governments. I have seen reports run from the system that I think are usable. Again, I don't know if they're default reports or if they're something that you have to create. I do know that just the overall controls from an accounting standpoint are less than some of the more sophisticated systems. So I give you kind of like an example like QuickBooks. There's not a lot of controls around the process. And so I don't know the procurement system with AccuFund, if that's sufficient?
I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah,
And I don't know, like in Munis you had only your own department. You couldn't spend somebody else's money.
right,
It had to go to the supervisor of that department to approve it before it went on.
right.
So there were various level of controls depending on how the department was structured. And I don't know what happens here. I don't know who even enters them.
Right.
So I don't know a lot yet. But, so I don't know how the controls are in that. But budgeting for budget reports are terrible.
Yeah.
And even general ledger. I mean, like I said, I should be able to run a general ledger report and not have to write the account number that I ran on the top of it so that later when I go to look at it, I'll know what I actually ran.
So that's where I would say, do you have enough of a knowledge of the system to make sure that it can't do that? Like, is it something that you can work with to get where you are?
I don't know. Well,
or-
we'll talk about it more because
Yeah.
I ran prices for Munis and it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, so expensive. And is there anything else in between? I guess that would be my other question. Munis obviously is the Cadillac of municipal finance. Most of the towns use it.
Right.
Very expensive. I think when Canton priced it, it was $100,000 for just to add the Board of Ed,
right,
because we already had it on the town side.
yep.
So it's very costly.
There's other systems, I mean, Tyler Technologies is kind of absorbing.
I know, they bought Budget Sense, and it became Visions, because that's what happened in Canton.
Infinite Visions.
But you know what, they still don't talk to one another. So the
Right.
town has Tyler and Munis, and the Board of Ed has Budget Sense became Vision of Tyler.
Right.
They don't talk to one another. They are still trying to build a bridge to be able to get the information out of the Board of Ed system and into the town system without us manually re-entering it.
Right.
So it's both now Munis or Tyler products, and they still don't talk to one another.
Right.
And they are the biggest out there,
Yeah, yeah.
so.
So it's, my recommendation would be, Amy, just to give it some time, and try to see if you can work with it, because, you did have the outflow. If it's the point where it's not working for you, in the board, then, certainly consider another system. There has to be other systems that are cheaper than Munis, that would, meet the needs of the town.
Sure, let's hope so.
And did you guys go out to RFP when you went to AccuFund?
I'm trying to remember, we have to, because whenever they do any of that, they have to go
I
out to
can't find
bid.
anything that supports that. but-
I remember it was the whole time around where every piece of computer, everything was crashing and nothing was working and we were losing data and it
Was
was,
it when Kim first came in too? Relatively, that she was like, we need this.
I have one other town that uses AccuFund, and they just switched, and I forget what they switched to.
Oh, so they
I have to
left.
check, so they left. They did
AccuFund.
not go to Munis, so let me see what they may have gone to. Their issue with AccuFund was the support. They weren't getting the support that they needed.
Well, no, not if every time you call, they tell you to call Bloom and you're paying by the hour.
Right.
yeah, that's
I
crazy.
mean,
I'm just writing notes now.
Amy, I can check with Jen too. She gets a little bit more involved on the software side of things.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, well, because definitely with these Munis prices, we
I
need to
know.
figure out how to make it work.
I know, I almost had heart failure. Well, the 309 though is the 122 for implementing it and then 66 a year, and that's both school and town.
Yeah.
So we would all be on the same system. So it does look much worse than it really is,
right, because you'd have to consider.
because it's counting the 3 years at 66 as part of that price. So they're giving you the, which we already do have some level of fee. I don't know what we're paying Bloom for AccuFund, but we do have some level of fee already, and I'm sure the board does too. So the one that's, I think on top that's probably the worst is the 309 is both sides. I think it's like 122 for implementation, which means data conversion too, bringing the last 3 years over. And then it's 66 a year, but that is everything for both sides. So, but yeah, so I just started and all I did was reach out to them because I used them.
Right.
So I reached out to my guy who is my product person there, and he put me in touch with somebody, and when I got the prices, I almost had
That's
heart
the deal
failure.
they give you.
Yeah, right?
I thought I'd be calling our EMS guys. So I do realize it's very expensive, but I do know that we need to do something. We need to be able to provide accurate reports that people aren't spending a lot of time trying to figure out what it was for, where it tied to, and all that other stuff, so.
You get reports like that, and you almost want to just pull it into Excel and do it the way you want.
Do they
Or
have-
go back and use QuickBooks?
Yeah, right?
Do they have somebody that can come in and actually work with you to look at, okay, what's the report you're looking for? What do you
About
need
3
to do?
weeks ago, the guy told me he'd call me to set up a training, because we have some training hours, because we've helped them sell to other communities.
Okay,
So other communities that are looking for it will come to here and ask us, show me how to do purchase orders, show me how to do this, show me how to do that. And if they sign up with them, we get
Right.
credit for training hours.
okay,
So we have a bank of credit of training hours.
yeah,
3 weeks and I still have not gotten a phone call to set up even some time.
right.
So it's taking them 3 weeks just to call me to set up something. So their customer service sucks.
Yeah.
And I told them their reporting sucked and that I need somebody to.
What was their,
Fuck that,
what was their
I can't even
response to
run-
that?
Dead silence.
Yeah.
I can't
So it
even
wasn't
run
even like,
a fixed
I
asset.
understand,
No,
but,
I can't
you
even
know,
run like a fixed asset.
Yeah.
I came in and said, okay, so my assets don't tie to yours, of course. So now I'm trying to figure out how the pieces all fit together so that it ties. And I'm like, so where's the report you run? As soon as you add a truck, there should be a report that you run that says asset number 6005 is $140,000. It's this DPW truck. This is the plate. This is the VIN. There's no such report.
I don't
Anywhere.
even think like a nonprofit would have that. like,
And
with trucks
it
and-
doesn't, it just doesn't make any sense. That should be a very basic, I have a fixed asset program, I should be able to run a report by asset that tells me what my asset is. And information enough that I can actually know which one I'm gonna then trade in when I go to figure out what we're getting rid of when we're buying a new truck. So, I mean, these are basic accounting reports. This is not anything fantastic. I mean, I would love to see something for budget that shows 3 years of actuals, current year budget, and what we're asking for next year, and what we spent so far this year. Now, that is a standard report in Munis. I don't know if I have the ability here to pull 3 years in, because everything is very linear, that it's this fiscal year or
When
last
you look
fiscal
at
year.
your-
I actually ran a last month report yesterday, and had heart failure when I started looking at it. It literally is every debit and credit added together. So it had all these negative encumbrances, and I'm like, what are all these? And then I ran a regular, this fiscal year report. I wanted to give you guys reports that actually had a date on the top. That said it's through
I know.
July 31 or through, well, it just sums it all up.
Yeah.
So what happened in the month of July is all this gobbledygook. So we put in a bunch of purchase orders, which then we cleared as we wrote checks. So it's all this gobbledygook, it makes no sense and nothing ties. So I'm like, well, that's a real helpful report. I mean, this is your financial report supposedly for last month.
Right, and when you, it can, when you did your budget reports, it would all be in Munis. So, even for your budget,
Right.
your budget
So-
document.
Right. So very frustrating from my perspective. So just one of those things that, I mean, I am trying to work with the guy to get me some
We need
knowledge.
to get the guy here first. That's the most important thing.
Yep.
He needs to get here.
And then Amy, have they given you other people, other municipalities that may be using
No.
this? No? Okay,
So I'm not so sure how many are really using it.
right.
Yeah, so how many training
I
hours?
did
have you
ask,
written?
I did ask for the Beacon Falls guy. Well, I think the people have come and gone already,
Oh, okay.
because we were one of the first. I think people have come and gone already, so they came and
Uh.
saw it, bought it, and then
Right.
it did the things that they needed it to do while they were here training, and then they got back there and realized, I can't do this. I mean, I would never have asked somebody to run a fixed asset report for me if I was out there looking at somebody's software. I would want to know, can I pay my people? Is it going to hit my ledger? Can I pay my bills? Is it going to hit my ledgers? Can I use requisitions? So I don't know that I would even ask. And here, they all looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, you can't run an asset that tells me what asset 6005 is? You cannot run me a report? And there's nothing out there.
Can you run an open purchase order report?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. I had to close everything for June 30. We had nothing out there, so we have no.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking
encumbrances
like,
outside.
it's not an issue for year end, but if
Right.
you go
Throughout the year, what's out there.
Yeah, what's out there, so
Yeah.
that's,
So there are shortfalls, I mean, but I don't know what else options are out there, and it would obviously probably take some major work to figure out what our choices are and the process of going through it. Beacon Falls is doing something. I told the guy I want to know when it gets all done,
Well, exactly.
what his
Cut your work
rating
in
looked
half.
like,
Cut
and
your
who he
work in
ended up
half.
picking.
Yeah, I
You're
will,
working half.
I will also check with my other client that switched from AccuFund
Where
because,
they fit.
again, they didn't go to Munis because it's just the cost, but,
It's very expensive.
All right, so any other questions? Any mic questions, any software questions?
MCC doesn't have like a recommendation?
Oh, CCM?
I was like, MCC?
CCM?
Yeah.
I'm so confused. No, you go, you know.
Not that I know of. I mean, I didn't reach out to them.
they may have
Wait for your beacon
recommendations,
fall.
but again, it all kind of comes down to cost, so.
Yeah.
um,
Wait for your beacon
The
fall.
one that most of the people use is Munis. I mean, when you go to Munis training, there are cities and towns, all different sizes. You know, Canton did it in 1997. So they kind of bit the bullet early and did it, but then when we wanted to add the Board of Ed, it was $100,000 just to add the Board of Ed
Yeah.
to theirs. And we already had paid for the town side. We already owned it, so it is costly, very costly, so.
Is there any way to get something more generic? Because while I've been on this board for the last 12 years, we've had 4 or 5 treasurers. So each one has had a method from their town to learn. So is there any way generic that's cheaper to deal with a situation like this? Because I'd hate to not consult one person qualified program that makes her comfortable when we have 4 or 5 others that might come like that.
No, I mean, like Amy said, I think Munis is probably the system that most of the municipalities use, certainly the larger municipalities. So that would be probably your most common system. Outside of that, there's a number of other types of systems out there. So I can't really say there's.
Because I don't know if any other treasurer, it's the first time I've seen somebody with an issue in this particular municipality with it. So, I mean, Kim?
Well, Kim brought this in.
Kim brought this one in.
Right. So this one has only been here since 1415.
Right. And
Partway through the year.
She may have, identified
talked to
certain
Denise,
reports that
Denise
she
talked about it.
used, but she may not have had the background that Amy had.
Might be running other reports.
You know,
She
so.
didn't try.
Part
to
of
run
it, she was
yeah.
redoing the chart of accounts too.
Right. At that point in time, she was redoing the chart of accounts, and like I said, if I remember correctly, all this computer equipment here was failing and things were falling apart, and everybody was
Right, I
putting
forget what you
together
had
new.
before, but it was,
It was
Phoenix.
terrible.
again, it
I
was,
think
They
it was like an
they had Phoenix
abacus.
before, yeah.
Yeah. And advocates.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thank you very much. Not that we're done with our questions, but for now.
Not a problem.
For now.
Happy to come out, happy to go over this stuff with you, because
Okay.
the more that better that you guys understand the financial statements and some of these
Mhm.
gray areas, I think it's better from an oversight perspective. as
Yep,
well.
definitely. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so Amy, I'll continue to work with you in the closing process.
It's that great time of year. All right, so on to 12C, Casino Building Permit Presentation, Rand.
If nobody minds, I've been in that hard chair for about an hour and a half, so I think I'm going to
Roll on the soft
slide
chair.
this one over.
That'll work. I don't know what happened to the issue. No, there's always more than one of those.
All right, Amy, you want to start with your board to tell them?
Well, I'll let, you guys did get these all as a separate email,
Mm-hmm.
and they, there's just 3 different sets of stuff.
I didn't print them.
ICC stuff, 4-leaf stuff,
Yeah.
and then stuff from the city of Everett.
Yes.
So the Everett is from the town perspective, where the other 2 are actually companies that do plan reviews
Right.
and inspection services for, and these are both have been involved in large projects. How's that? Is that enough of a
I
intro?
suppose, yeah. I think that the intention tonight is to let the board know that at a particular point in time, that appropriation will be required to the building department in order to proceed forward with at least the investigation of the acquisition of these services.
Yeah, there was
Monday, I think.
PDF.
I
When did you, I got it, when I opened it. I don't remember when it got
When did you
sent.
send it? Because I don't,
It should have been the same day that you got your
Yeah,
package
but
on Monday.
later or something, yeah.
I didn't, no, I got the package, but I didn't get anything else.
But at any rate,
Okay.
what we've taken a look at
It might
right
have been too
now.
big. It was a large file. I think one presentation is 60-something pages.
It is large. It's huge.
But this is an answer to Bob's question of,
Correct.
what are we gonna do with the casino? Building permit's gonna walk in the door, and how do we do this? And each time I've said that the revenue is gonna come in as a building permit revenue, because that's a normal course of business for us. So it will come to the general fund. It will be no different than this year. We just talked about Calamar being the reason they're over,
Yep.
because the 200,000 they regularly budget are for other projects, but there was an additional 200 that came in this year related to Calamar. Well, next year, we're gonna have some version of that same thing, where there will be some number above the 200,000 tied to the casino permit, and, but neither has been budgeted, neither the revenue or the expenditure.
Right.
So we are in a process, though. I think, Randy, you want to talk a little bit about the requirement once the plans hit your desk?
Well, the state statute allows 30 days from the application of a permit to approve or deny that permit. Okay, with large projects, most of the time, you could be 60, 80 days, but it really depends upon the completeness of the application. And specific to this project, I will be looking for RFQs in 2 different areas. Those RFQs will go out, one that will detail the cost of a separate plan review, and then one that will detail the cost of inspection services. Through the course of that, as we gather this information in, I will also put together a budget from the town side that will detail the cost of us to provide those inspection services to the casino. To give you an indication, any outside contractor that comes in to provide these inspection services have to have the same level and the exact same license that I carry or any other licensed inspector in this state carry. We all carry the same qualifications. We all carry the same basic knowledge. And we're all licensed to the same degree. The only thing that would make anything any differently would be if an engineer or an architect carried that license as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that from an inspecting perspective, they're any more qualified. As this thing plays out, to put a set of prints like this out for a plan review, 2 of the prices I've received back right now exceed $200,000 for just the plan review. At that point in time, the deficiencies in that plan are identified through that process. And the remedy to those non-compliant items are dealt with and corrected through the plans, so that by the time the plans are approved, those are the plans that will be on that site that will be used for inspection. How you guys want to be able to handle this is up to you, but the building department has 30 days, primarily by statute, to approve or deny that permit, which means that that expenditure needs to be in the pipeline, or at least that process needs to be prepared and that trigger ready to be pulled prior to the application. I asked Amy today if it were possible to have the process in place and approved, but transfer the money into it immediately upon receipt of the permitting fee. Meaning, we go through our process. We determine what the cost and the prices are going to be, and then that added appropriation, or the line item, I guess you would say, the added appropriation line item specific to the casino is approved ahead of time, but then upon receipt of the permitting fee, it gets transferred into that fund for expenditure.
So I think we have to be forward thinking on this. I think we need to give them the nod for an RFQ to go out so that we have somebody in place. So when that plan hits our desk, we have somebody picked already. That 30 days is going to come really quick and go. And, you know, I don't know whether that's going to happen next month or the month after or 3 months from now, but.
And to give the board somewhat of an update, my discussion with a couple of the attorneys that are involved in the process, they have seen a slowdown at this point in time, but they are still moving forward in a very methodical fashion. So they couldn't give me an exact date for application, but they did indicate that it is still moving forward, in a forward trajectory.
So we're gonna get the fee in, and then
At the
we're
same
gonna
time,
do
we get the
that.
permit, and then we have 30 days to turn around a yes or a no on it.
Well, that's the building department saying
That's-
yes or no.
That's correct.
That's
Yeah,
a plan
that's
review, though.
For the
Right.
approval or denial.
But then when you need to spend the money to conduct everything else, that's all added appropriation, how is that gonna be handled?
So the money is going to come in, and it's not budgeted money.
Right.
So we'll give an estimate of $2 million. That building permit's going to come in, and it's going to be $2 million. So we have a couple options.
200.
The building permit's
the-
going to be $2 million.
On a $200 million project, it's 1.55% of the construction cost. So if it's, let's say it's $250 million total cost, the building permit comes in at $200 million, the permitting fee is $3,100,000.
All right, so that $3 million revenue, we have not budgeted for, nor have we budgeted to offset those costs.
Right.
But there's a couple pieces. The plan review is the part that has the 30-day requirement. So that, we really need a line item added, which you guys, I have to come to you to get a line item. We don't have a line item called casino inspections or casino review. I don't have any line items for that. We have a professional service line, which we could use, but I think it might be helpful if we do something,
We have to have that casino ordinance.
something separate. But I need to come to you to get that. I need you guys to say, yes, you can add those lines. So the other part is, we really need you guys to say, yeah, go ahead and get out an RFQ so that when it comes time, we have somebody in the pipeline to start that review when that review walks in the door, when that application walks in the door. So the two estimates are for plan review are 200 and 250?
No, it's, one is, they're only like $300, $400 apart.
Okay.
Which I know that they use a specific formula in developing these costs, but they're both around $205,000 for just these plan reviews. But that, to give you an indication of what that carries or covers, and that is that's all your mechanicals, that's your accessibility, that's your plumbing, your electrical, your energy code, mechanical building. So it encompasses quite a bit, and as it breaks down, but just the structural review is $90,000 from this particular entity, and that is the International Code Council. And then the individual respective, the mechanical, plumbing, electrical, energy, and accessibility, those are all $22,500 apiece in terms of the individual on that. But it really breaks the entire plan down. It really breaks down the components of the structure, the use of the structure, everything that goes with it.
So
But
we're
that's
not
more
going to need an
expense.
additional appropriation before that application walks in the door with dollars. We're not going to need an additional appropriation because we're not going to spend any dollars until after that. But we need you guys to know that we're out there RFQing for a couple $100,000 just for the plan review. Never mind the inspection services. The inspection services, and one of those was $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million.
Yeah, million,
So I
million
think
two.
the
Is
total is
that all going to
1.5.
incorporate into the budget as added appropriations? Like, how are we going to?
Yes, and my suggestion last month was that we do it from the revenue instead of from fund balance. You can appropriate excess revenues. It doesn't always have to come from fund balance.
Okay.
It can come from excess revenues. So these are unbudgeted revenues that we were counting on them, but without knowing when they were, the thought of budgeting for them and budgeting for the expenditures and then not needing them wasn't really helpful. At the time, we weren't even sure it was going forward. At the time, they didn't even have their Indian Affairs approval that they needed. So none of it is in the budget. So there's additional revenue coming in of, if his inspections are correct, $3 million. And then some version of that is going to go back out the door, whether it goes to a company through the RFQ process that we pick and have them do the plan review, or that we pick for inspections and have them do it, or whether we hire inspectors ourselves, which we talked about term of the project.
Yeah, duration of project.
So, so there are a couple options, but really what I wanted from you guys was to, first of all, to let you know that it's coming. I'm gonna need new accounts if we wanna account for it separately. So I'm gonna have to ask you guys for adding those accounts, just like I did last month for the couple of accounts I asked for last month. And that the RFQ process really needs to start like now, so that we have somebody in place for when that permit does walk in, we have somebody in place that can do that.
Makes sense.
Good. Any other questions?
Cindy still has that look on her.
I know.
I know.
It's okay, it's just that what we're gonna do for this is the same thing that, like when you were asking for Calamar and where are we gonna get the money, there's extra revenue, we could appropriate it from there,
Right.
like that's not
Now
the difference.
now that money really is gone, because that came in
It's
last
in
year.
the
So
rate.
the revenue I just reported to you guys with the $366,000 surplus, even after spending 1.6 million, had that extra 200,000 in it. So we had asked for it in last fiscal year, while it was in last fiscal year. It didn't end up that we needed all the, what did we pay the guy? $100 and something
Yeah,
for the one?
$113
We did end up with
or
a guy
something.
coming in, but it was on June 27th or something, so we ended up using a very small amount of money for that coverage. But it's really the same essential items. So, and it could be appropriated at different parts of time depending on how we do, but it's not coming from fund balance, but I can't imagine it doesn't go through the same process. You know, that is from the revenue stream instead. I can't imagine
Why
it doesn't go
did
through. Huh?
I said, why did we let Mike leave?
You
He
can
was
get-
right
You
there.
can get him tomorrow.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. All right, cool.
All right. So we can start on an RFQ? Okay.
I don't think we have to vote on that. It's just,
No.
you know, we know
Yep.
what it is.
It's
what
really
it
to let
is.
you guys
Yeah.
know what's coming. I mean,
Yeah, it is what it is, and, you know.
And we'll try to make sure that we provide as complete information as you need.
So now that casino fund that we set up, how do you anticipate using that?
oh my.
Well,
Okay,
that
I read the
doesn't-
ordinance.
That doesn't
through,
involve me at all.
Yeah.
This is the thing, we
I'm
didn't
out of
write
it.
the ordinance, we set up the fund as an in and out. It's really what the thing was, anything that was casino was to go in and out. Of
Casino
that.
impact.
There'd be no.
Right, that casino impact fund is the $3 million that will come
Right,
each year that
someday,
it's
over the
open
rainbow.
at some future date. But there is an ordinance that was approved by the Board of Selectmen tied to it. And I have read through it, and it is very, very vague.
It's too big.
So
Sorry, Bob.
I would have a very difficult time administering that and deciding who gets to spend that money.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's a default that if it's not spent, then it goes as a reduction to taxes.
Did you vote on that motion? I thought that
We
you were
voted
still-
on it, but
It doesn't have that, I thought it went into general, well, what he said was it goes into general fund.
Yeah.
No, that's
To,
not.
well, no, listen, it
Oh,
said
that's-
in the
oh.
meeting, they said it was to go into general fund, but to something taxes, to, there's a word, to something taxes. I don't know.
to reduce taxes, but,
Or something,
and
but it's
I don't
crazy.
have it here, but I'll bring it for the next meeting you guys have.
Could you send it ahead of time?
Sure, that's a good idea, I'll send it out,
Yeah.
probably not tomorrow, but maybe Friday or,
But you didn't final vote on that one, did you?
well,
I didn't think so.
I didn't think that happened, did it?
I can't remember.
well, we voted, the Board of Selectmen voted on definitely a casino impact ordinance. But that ordinance has to be approved by the town, so all we did is approve the ordinance to go to a town meeting. And what we'll do is put that ordinance, now it looks like it's going to be on the ballot for the November governor's election. So there'll be a yes or no question. And basically what we're trying to do, it just basically says to establish a separate fund. This casino impact money will be put in a separate fund, and the separate fund will be used, and it says to list specific things like public safety and schools, but it also says quality of life, positive impact of the casino and quality of life of East Windsor. And then there is, I've forgotten what the last sentence says, something about if there's money left over, that'll be used to help the taxpayers or something. I'm not sure exactly what it says. But it doesn't say anything about how this money will be allocated. It doesn't say anything about it. It just says it will be put in a separate fund and used to improve the quality of life, basically, in East Windsor. Now, that'll be fine. And so when that money comes, we put it in a separate fund. And that's, I think, very important, rather than put it in general fund. But how that fund is distributed is yet to be determined. That's not determined yet. And that's what slowed down the other fund, because we tried before at a town meeting to put it into a separate fund. And that got confused, because not only did that ordinance say we want to put it in a separate fund, then that ordinance continued to say how that separate fund would be distributed. And that gets to be contentious, and it's not clear. I think my own feeling at this time of how that fund would be distributed is various departments, like the police department and the fire departments and human services, and anybody who felt that they would like or would use some of this impact money and needed some of it, should be a lot like the budget process that we have now. And the Board of Selectmen would give it to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen would review it, probably give it to the Board of Finance. They'd go through it, and then it would go to a town meeting or a ballot with line items. Maybe there'd be 10 line items, and we would vote on each line item, something like that. But that's just me talking. We have to really work that out. That's not part of the ordinance that we're talking about putting in. The ordinance we're putting in just says take this money from the casino and put it in a separate fund. Use it, and you have to say when you make separate fund, you have to say what you want the fund used for. That's part of the statutes, and that's what we did. We said we wanted to use to make the casino have a positive impact on East Windsor, and there were some specifics in that, but it doesn't say how the fund would be distributed at all. And I suspect it would be best to have the residents vote on how that money should be distributed. But that's
I'll just share my only concern with that, then it's no bodies. Because you can't hire people that you don't know this year to next year whether you're going to be able to cover their salaries.
Yep.
So if the police come and say they need 5 new officers, if you're going to the taxpayers each year to fund those 5 officers, it's going to be a problem.
Well, and I hear what you're saying, and I said that was me talking, and I don't have all the answers. the ordinance is just to create a separate fund. Now, how we, and I think you're right, if you're gonna hire police officers, then you have to have something in the distribution process that if you do hire people or you have expenses that are continuous, then it has to be funded. So that has to be in the ordinance of the way you fund things. So you're right, I agree with you.
Do you foresee the Board of Selectmen putting this policy together, the board, like, our board, the treasurer, you know?
Yeah, no, I see everybody. I think,
Yeah.
yes, I think the Board of Selectmen would be involved. I think the Board of Finance would be involved. We'd probably have public hearings. So really, the town will be involved in the second part. Now, the first part of the ordinance, or the first ordinance, is just to put it in a separate fund.
We can't do anything with it because we don't have.
We don't have we don't have the procedure to distribute it. That's true. But I think we should put it in a separate fund.
And I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because it's allowed, I think it's a good idea to do that, because for some reason that casino goes away, anything tied to it needs to go away too. You know, that's only for as long as they're here, or
Well, that's what
however
it, I
many
mean, the
years
whole
it is.
impact fund was supposed to be anything that the casino directly impacted. Not making taxes go down, not that kind of stuff. It was supposed to be to protect the community from the impact that the casino would bring. So, I don't think it's worded that way, but. Huh? It doesn't feel good.
No, it made them too.
Oh, yeah. I guess,
But
okay.
we have to make, having it so, like, I'd hate you guys to put all this work into it and then and then we look at it, or she looks at it and is like, oh no, we can't do this, we can't do that. We just have to
No,
make
I
sure we
don't know. We
Yeah.
put work in just making a separate fund, and then that'll be voted right in the ballot, and we could say, so. But then, how we distribute that money that's in that fund, that's.
Can we make
a
it like a
blank
separate, like you have the regular town budget and then the casino budget? The first year, we'd have to do it some new way, but then maybe the next budget cycle, here's your general fund budget, here's your casino budget, and just have it go everything.
Yeah, that could very well be.
What's the matter?
Oh, no, sorry.
Nothing.
So does that help answer your casino questions?
I guess for now. For now. I
So
mean,
yeah, Bob, if
the
you would send that
ordinance-
out, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I will. I'll send out the
Yeah.
ordinance. It's also in the, we did pass it in the, at a Board of Selectmen meeting, so if you look at the minutes,
It's in the minutes.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. All right, on to board member comments. I'll start this one.
I have nothing.
All right, Cindy?
I have nothing.
I'm fine.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Sarah has a little bit of an update for us that all of us may not like all that much, because I guess certain people don't think we do our job, so.
I attended the Charter Revision Commission meeting on Monday night. These are some of the highlights that were discussed. Changing the title of treasurer to a financial director, hiring a chief financial officer, also hiring someone who they haven't put a title on yet, someone who researches or offers support to the Board of Finance and other boards regarding making financial decisions. I questioned where that new person would come into play, because our current process is the department head going to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen then voting and sending it to us, and then we vote on it. So I explained that process, and I just didn't know where that person would come into play. Would the department head go to them? Would we discuss it with the I just didn't know if we were gonna discuss.
Well,
it.
and what's Amy? She is our reference of,
Yeah.
all sorts of reference, so, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Also, there was a discussion of having quarterly referendums on scheduled dates, instead of town meetings to approve projects between $20,000 and $1 million.
They really hate those bathrooms, don't they? I've never seen anything so crazy in my entire life, but go ahead.
That concerned me because, for example, if there was a broken down fire truck or something of that nature, that might potentially need to wait months to approve a project.
That's crazy. And a referendum costs $4,500.
Yes, that was
And where were we going to get all the money to pay all those people that we just listed off in a line? Are you throwing that tree and we don't know it, Bob?
I have another fund, impact fund.
Also discussion of line item referendum votes for our annual budget process.
Oh my God.
Line item
budget.
referendum votes.
Oh,
So they were
line
talking
item.
about taking the departments that were looking for the most money and like going down by department and actually voting on department, like Public Works, Parks and Rec.
Horrible idea.
And I explained that, you know, it might look like a certain dollar amount, but some items can't be reduced. You know, like
Right.
certifications and education, you know, there's things in there that you can't really play around with.
And things are dependent on other things.
Right. So just my understanding of it is that some of them, it didn't seem like they understood how, how things are, you have to go in order of certain ways. It also was brought up that our treasurer is not involved in our meetings. So I did speak in public participation and say that Gail also sat up here when she was interim treasurer. And I did say Amy is very active in explaining.
We tell her a whole. Sorry.
Going into
Why
great
would they
detail.
even say that? What?
They just, the gist of it was that they just don't, they think our board, we don't have involvement from the treasurer, that we spend a lot of money. And I also brought up that the Board of Selectmen sees the budget before the Board of Finance, and I did say that if there are issues that they have the opportunity to reduce things and play around before it comes to us. So I feel the Board of Finance gets a bad rap, but I just wanted to emphasize the process. Let's see. I think that was pretty much it. I have their agenda here. But I was able to attend because usually we have RTC and it was canceled that night.
That's
So.
cool.
I think that
was interesting.
I think the charter commission is going to have a problem just
Well,
on the basis.
There was also, let me just read this and then you can just there was also a posting today that somebody did, and he had done a poll and had asked questions of Facebook land and just saying, do you think we should require a town meeting in $1 million? And he asked certain questions. And he brought a survey and brought the information forward, and then he said at the same time, Cher Balch also did the same survey, and all her answers that she got were the exact opposite of the answers that he presented.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, I think it's a little crazy. Sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, well, now even thinking about all these things that they're talking about with the that involve, like how the Board of Finance works or how the other boards work, not to have representation from somebody on the Board of Finance, that probably would be a good idea. But just on basis that they're not representative of the community, so every single thing they talk about is only talked about on one side. You're not getting opposing views. And my thought and what I would advocate for is to just toss it out, because the process is so flawed. You don't have a representative of the community. So you have all these people spending all this time talking about things, but it's only one side.
All they're doing is talking about the things they don't like.
Right, so you
Things they
don't
want,
have true representative government doing this. And so I would say just like, you're not even having a valid conversation.
So what's the process? So they come up with a proposed new charter, right? So does the town vote on that?
Well, it'll go to the selectmen first, right, Bob? It'll go to you. And you guys will decide whether to send it to referendum, right?
That's true.
But
That
they'll
we will
send it
decide
because
whether
they
to send it to
internally are on it.
referendum. And also in the forgot what you call it, but the chart, the formation that we gave them, the guidance we gave them and how to change the charter, we said we wanted each change they make to be separate, so you could take one change out and it wouldn't affect the other changes, and we want to have it voted on by the town, and we want to have it, so there could be like 15 items that they want to change, and maybe 6 of them will be changed and 9 of them won't be.
But we keep on bringing up so many people brought up the problem with representation has been ignored, and I think they might just be blindsided 18 months from their start date to just say, we don't, you know, you didn't do it right.
I haven't followed.
Not valid.
There's, now that I'm glad you're talking about this in a way, because obviously, and I don't know any more than you do, but there's definitely a procedure to changing a charter, and it's like an 18-month procedure, and you have to have public hearings, and there's so we'll just I'll lay out the chart for you the next time we have a Board of Finance meeting. I can at least tell you the steps they're going to take.
And it just seemed to me, I mean, I also brought up that we're elected officials, and you know, we vote on things, and it just seemed like they maybe don't like the way that we vote on things, so that's why they want to involve someone else that's going to influence us, so maybe we're going to vote the way they want us to. I don't know, it was just, so I'm going to try to attend, you know, more if I can, and I think it's great if others, you know, get involved and, you know, really hear it, and you might be able to educate them on some things.
You know what got me?
Yeah, thank you.
It was Bonnie He was placed on there, and one of the audience said they didn't want anybody who knew anything about the charter to be on it. And Bonnie was on there, gee, quite a bit. And she was the one that helped place in this 2% that has literally driven us crazy, and yet she's never there to see what happened. I mean, there's no input from that girl to say this was bad or this is good. And if they feel this, they should come to all these meetings and see what their suggestions will reflect on this town and how tough it is on us. I mean, we fought that doggone, what, 2%? I've been on here 12 years. That's tough.
Well, just, you can hear though, just by like the things that Sarah's saying that she heard and the things that had, all of this stemmed from our life enriching $800,000 expenditure. So what happens, they're not really doing what Bob charged them to do, and that is to adjust the charter to make the town work more effectively. They're adjusting it every time something happens that they don't like. They're focusing on it, and that's what they're going to change because they didn't like it and they didn't like the result. That's not what this was about, and that's unfortunate because it's going to be a wasted 18-month process again, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, because they did discuss again the discussion of the supplemental appropriation process and having a minimum for a town meeting versus a referendum, and it was.
And, and that's another thing too. They're so worried about that, but they're not mentioning that it costs $4,500 to have every referendum and that you have to staff every. I mean, it's. Yeah, it's just it seems whatever happened the week before that they didn't like comes up in the meeting the next week to change. So it's unfortunate.
You better grow 2 trees.
Unfortunate.
And nobody representing people that have kids in schools.
Yeah. Although that's good though, people are going now though, because that's what was posted on Facebook. A couple of people went and they did represent the town half that has kids and stuff, and so maybe.
But they're not represented on the committee.
They are not on the committee. They are not. Nope. You are correct. All right. So anything else? Any other comments? Any? All right. So next meeting, September 19th. Oh, I don't even have to look at that. Okay. Before we make a motion to adjourn, let me just look at mine just to make sure. School starts again, so life gets crazy. Nope, we're good. All right. So, if I can have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
And a second.
I said 4.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
It's a little concerning that they don't think I do my job.
That was just crazy.
Oh, don't, know, they obviously haven't seen a single meeting. They obviously have not seen a single meeting.
And Amy,
We have never
give me a
not
break.
had, even when we didn't have anyone in that position, we had someone advising.
I did say that.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
just-
We've always had something.
That's just like, if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we are. Can you shut that off for a sec? Because I do want to say something. Not really. Well, no, it really isn't. I just don't want to, because I'm going to make a comment that